Well, James has just said, you don't even know what will happen tomorrow. And then he develops this idea even further. He says, what is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Imagine a cold day when you breathe out and you can see this little vapor cloud of your breath that just hovers there in front of you for a few seconds, and then it's gone. And James says, that's your life. Whether it's a short life or even whether it's a long life, even if you live to 80 or 90 years old, what do you always hear people say who are older? They say, I can't believe it went so fast. In the Old Testament, it often compares your life to a breath. Psalm 39 says this. It says, you have made my days a mere handbreadth. The span of my years is as nothing before you. Each man's life is but a breath. Man is a mere phantom as he goes to and fro. He bustles about, but only in vain. He heaps up wealth, not knowing who will get it. Or in the book of Job, in Job 7, Job says, remember, O God, that my life is but a breath. There was a Pulitzer Prize winning author in the 20th century. His name was William Saroyan, and he died of cancer in 1981. But 5 days before he died, he called up the Associated Press and he gave them an interview. And in that interview, he said this. He says, everyone has got to die, but I always believed that an exception would be made in my case. And I thought, what a true to life statement. Everybody's going to die, but I just always assumed that my case would be the exception. And even though none of us actually think that, none of us actually think we're going to be the exception, yet on a strange sort of level, we also think we will. And yet what James says is that your life is over before you realize it. It's a mist. And so the warning that James is giving here is about how, given these realities, right, given these realities that you don't even control tomorrow, his warning is about the foolishness of arrogantly pursuing your own plans. A pastor friend of mine was preaching on this passage recently, and we were talking about it on the phone about what it means. And he had all these wonderful analogies for it. He said, think about it like playing a game of chess. And think about playing a game of chess. I love chess. I started just a little while ago watching videos of grandmasters playing chess. The people who are just extraordinarily good at chess they're called grandmasters, and it's like they can see all these possibilities in the chess game. They can see sort of into the future in the sense that they can plan counters and strategies and traps and all these things. They can prepare for future moves. Most people who play chess are like me. You can maybe think one move ahead or maybe two moves ahead or something like that if you're lucky. But just think about it. If it's hard to predict what's going to happen in chess, how much harder do you think it is to predict what's going to happen in life? Right? If it's hard to be a grandmaster in chess, how much harder do you think it is to be a grandmaster at life when you don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow? Or another analogy that my friend was using was that of flying in a plane. Think about when you're flying in a plane and everything is going fine, everything seems normal, it all seems stable and predictable. And so you can sit there and you can read a book or you can eat a meal, you can have a conversation with the person sitting next to you, and you can do that until you hit turbulence. And then all of a sudden the plane starts shaking, and all of a sudden you realize that you are sitting in a tube at 30,000 feet in the air and you're doing 500 miles an hour and you have no control, none. And so what do you do? You grab onto something. You grab onto the seat in front of you or the person next to you. And what are you doing? What are you doing? You're grasping for some sort of control when in reality you don't have any. And that's what life is like when you're cruising along and then all of a sudden something happens and you realize we don't have any control over this. We have no control. Isn't that, at least in some measure, what's happened over the past weeks? And yet here's the thing. James is saying we never had control. We never did. If you think about it, we were not in control of our lives back in February before all this happened. We would wake up and go about our days, and we maybe thought we were in control. Life felt more predictable. But the truth of the matter is, back then, we didn't know what would happen that day. We didn't know what would happen tomorrow. The only difference is we thought we did. It was like the plane was cruising along. Life felt predictable and stable. But the truth is that there's never been a day in your life that you've been in control. And so what's the difference now? The only difference now is that now it's like we realize it a little bit more. It's like putting on glasses for the first time, and all of a sudden you see things that were there all along, but you didn't realize they were there. All of a sudden, we realize maybe just a little bit more the truth that's been there the whole time. I think this is an important lesson for us. Nothing right now is actually any different, not in any ultimate sense. You and I had no control over our lives 2 months ago. We just thought we did. And all that's happened is that we see that a little bit more clearly. And actually, the danger, if I can call it that, is that after the turbulence goes away, we just go back to normal. And we assume, once again, that we are in control. And so the first point is a warning about the arrogant pursuit of our own plans, as though we have more control over our lives than we actually do. We're living our lives as though we are the decisive actors in the story. And because we think that we are the decisive actors in the story, we pursue our own agendas, as James is about to say, without reference to God and his plans. And so that leads to our second point in verses 15 to 17. So James's second point then is an encouragement to live our lives focused on the will of God, to live our lives focused on the will of God. So James says in verse 15, instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. So a couple of things here. First of all, James isn't saying that making plans for the future is wrong. He isn't saying that you shouldn't plan for retirement, or you shouldn't plan to go on a holiday, or he's not even saying that you shouldn't make business plans for next year. He's not saying any of those things. And we know that for a couple of reasons. One is that in the Bible, planning is generally considered a good thing. In Proverbs, for instance, it's a good thing. But then the second thing is that this phrase, if it is the Lord's will, is clearly the key phrase. What James was warning against in verses 13 and 14 is a kind of planning that is pursued independently of God and his kingdom, as though those things are really afterthoughts. Those things are inconsequential matters in our lives because we are the decisive actors. That's what he's warning against. And so if that's what he's warning against, then what he's encouraging here is a kind of planning that recognizes and submits to the sovereignty of God and the priority of his kingdom in everything. Well, what he's encouraging is a life that's lived in all respects with reference to God. Sometimes I'll see this kind of thing at church. I'll see one child who asks another child if they can come over to their house for lunch and hang out with the family for lunch, and then maybe come back with them for the afternoon service. And oftentimes when I see that, the very first thing that the child will do is they look up at their mom or they look up at their dad, because they know, right? They know that it's what mom thinks or it's what dad thinks. That's the important thing. They can have their own plans, but it's what mom or dad thinks that is decisive. And I like that as an illustration for this. It's like the very first thing we're thinking of is, what does my Heavenly Father think? And the idea of saying, if it's the Lord's will, is a way of acknowledging that it's the Lord's whose plans are ultimate. right? It's the Lord who's the decisive agent. I can have all these plans, but his plans are what's going to count. You'll recognize this on a smaller scale in your own everyday life. You wake up in the morning, you have plans for the day, but how often does your day go exactly according to plan? There's more traffic on the road or something breaks, whatever it is, and you realize that your plans are not what are determinative. There's nothing wrong with making plans, but you recognize that it's the Lord's will that counts. And then look how thoroughly this is the case. He says that we're supposed to say, if it's the Lord's will, we will live. If it's the Lord's will, like, I'll live today. And if it's not, I won't. That's how comprehensive this is. His plans are going to prevail to the point where whether I live today or not, that's how comprehensive this is.